The broken ship and first contact. The warning alarm screamed through the bridge of the research vessel Prometheus as Captain Sarah Drake fought to maintain control of her dying ship. Sparks cascaded from overloaded circuits while the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending loose equipment floating through the air like deadly projectiles. The main drive had failed 3 hours ago, and now the backup systems were following suit with mechanical precision. Sarah's calloused hands flew across the emergency controls, her engineering background serving her well even as her ship plummeted toward the surface of Cathvar. She had heard whispers about this world in the darkest corners of space stations and black market cantinas. The Galactic Council had designated it as forbidden territory, a place where the most dangerous predators in known space were exiled to live or die by their own savage rules. The hull groaned under the stress of atmospheric entry as Sarah strapped herself into the captain's chair. Through the viewscreen, she caught glimpses of the hellish landscape below. Jagged mountain ranges stretched across continents like broken bones, while seas of liquid methane reflected the sickly green light of the system's dying star. This was not a world meant for human life. Yet here she was, about to crash land among creatures that had terrorized entire sectors of the galaxy. The impact came with the sound of tearing metal and shattering crystal. Sarah's consciousness flickered as her safety harness cut into her shoulders, and the world spun in violent circles. When the ship finally came to rest, embedded in what looked like a field of razor-sharp obsidian, an eerie silence fell over everything. The only sounds were the distant hiss of escaping atmosphere and the rhythmic drip of coolant from damaged systems. Sarah unbuckled herself with trembling fingers and checked her body for injuries. A cut on her forehead bled freely, and her left shoulder ached where the harness had dug in. But she was alive. She grabbed her emergency kit and sealed the breach in her environmental suit before making her way to the twisted remains of the airlock. The ship's hull had been torn open like paper, leaving her with no choice but to venture outside. The air on Cathvar was breathable but heavy with the metallic taste of iron and ozone. Twin suns cast long shadows across a landscape that seemed designed by nightmare itself. Crystalline formations jutted from the ground at impossible angles, their surfaces reflecting fractured light in ways that hurt to look at directly. In the distance, she could see movement, dark shapes that were too large and moved in ways that defied her understanding of biology. Sarah's training as a deep space engineer had prepared her for many scenarios, but nothing quite like this. She checked her plasma cutter and energy rifle, knowing that her survival would depend as much on her wits as her weapons. The emergency beacon in her kit was damaged beyond repair, meaning rescue was not coming. She would have to find another way off this world, or die trying. The first creature emerged from behind a cluster of black crystal spires before she had taken a dozen steps from her wrecked ship. It stood nearly 4 meters tall on 6 powerful legs, its body covered in natural armor plates that shifted color like oil on water. Rows of compound eyes tracked her movement with predatory intelligence, while mandibles the size of sword blades clicked together in what might have been communication or threat display. Sarah recognized the species from her xenobiology studies, though she had never seen one in person. The Vexhi were legendary spider hunters from the Centaurus arm, capable of tracking prey across entire star systems. Their venom could dissolve most known armor materials, and their speed was such that they could outrun most atmospheric craft. This particular specimen bore scars that spoke of countless battles and hard-won victories. She forced herself to remain still as the creature circled her, its movements fluid and silent despite its massive size. Running would only trigger its hunting instincts, and she had nowhere to go anyway. Instead, she kept her hands visible and spoke in calm, measured tones, hoping her universal translator would convey peaceful intent. "I mean no harm," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My ship crashed. I'm not a threat to you or your territory." The Vexhi paused in its circling, head tilting with what might have been curiosity. When it spoke, the words came through her translator as a series of clicks and whistles, but the meaning was clear enough. "Human," it said, the word carrying undertones of both surprise and contempt. "You are far from your soft worlds, little mammal. This is Kethvar, where only the strong survive and the weak become food. What brings one of your fragile kind to the prison of predators?" Before Sarah could answer, the ground began to vibrate with heavy footsteps. More creatures were approaching, drawn by the crash, or perhaps by some form of communication she couldn't detect. The Vexay's posture shifted, becoming more alert and aggressive as new players entered the scene. A pack of Grimlock emerged from a canyon to the south, their massive forms moving with surprising grace despite their bulk. Each one stood over 3 meters at the shoulder, with armor plating that looked like it could deflect starship weaponry. Their faces were nightmare amalgamations of reptilian and mammalian features, with tusks that curved like scimitars and eyes that glowed with inner fire. Behind them came others, species Sarah recognized from intelligence reports and nightmare stories told in military academies. A Shadowmaw, its form seeming to bend light around itself until it was more suggestion than substance. Several acid spitters whose biology was so toxic they couldn't be contained on any known prison world except this one. Even a young phase hunter, barely the size of a ground car, but already showing the reality-warping abilities that made its kind the stuff of legends. The Vexai clicked its mandibles in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as amusement. "It seems your arrival has attracted attention," it said. "The proving grounds have not seen new prey in many cycles. The Council will be interested." Sarah's mind raced as she processed the implications. A council suggested organization, hierarchy, rules of some kind. These weren't just mindless beasts fighting over scraps. They had formed some kind of society, with its own laws and customs. That meant there might be a way to negotiate, to find common ground that didn't end with her being torn apart. "What are the proving grounds?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady as the circle of predators tightened around her. "Where newcomers prove their right to exist," the Vexai replied. "Where the strong earn their place among us, and the weak feed the strong. You cannot leave this world, human. The energy barriers that contain us will destroy any ship that attempts to breach them. Your only choice is to prove yourself worthy of life, or provide entertainment in your death." The largest Grimlock stepped forward, its massive head lowering until Sarah could smell the carrion on its breath. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. "I am Kethmore, Alpha of the Canyon Pack. This soft thing will not last 5 minutes in the grounds. Perhaps we should end its suffering now." Sarah felt fear clawing at her throat, but she forced it down with the discipline of her military training. Fear would get her killed. What she needed was information, allies, and time to understand the rules of this deadly game she had been forced to play. "I request the right to prove myself," she said, her voice carrying across the gathering crowd with more confidence than she felt. "If this world has laws, then I claim the protection of those laws until I can face whatever trial you deem appropriate." The creatures exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds that her translator couldn't fully process. Finally, the Vexai spoke again. "Interesting. The human knows something of our ways. Very well, Sarah Drake of Earth. You will have your chance in the proving grounds at the next sunrise. Survive the trial, and you earn the right to exist among us. Fail, and your death will at least provide amusement for those who have lived long enough to appreciate such things." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah was escorted by a pair of Grimlock toward what appeared to be a natural amphitheater carved from the living rock. The walls rose high above her head, smooth and polished by countless years of wind and rain. The floor was covered in sand that had been stained dark with the blood of previous challengers. She was assigned a small cave near the arena floor, barely large enough for her to lie down, but offering protection from the elements. As night fell on Kethvar, Sarah sat in the entrance to her temporary shelter and planned her strategy. She had her weapons, her training, and most importantly, her human ability to think creatively under pressure. The next morning would bring the first real test of whether human ingenuity could triumph over alien savagery. As she drifted off to an uneasy sleep, Sarah Drake had no idea that she was about to become the first being in 10,000 years to not just survive the proving grounds, but to fundamentally change the balance of power on the deadliest world in the galaxy. The Council of Monsters and Ultimate Test. Dawn on Kethvar came with the sound of hunting calls echoing across the crystalline wasteland. Sarah Drake stood at the entrance to her cave shelter, watching as the arena began to fill with spectators. Creatures from across the galaxy had come to witness what most expected to be a brief and bloody execution disguised as a trial. The proving grounds stretched before her like a nightmare made manifest. Ancient stone pillars rose from the blood-stained sand, their surfaces carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Weapon racks lined the walls, filled with exotic implements of destruction from 100 different worlds. In the center of the arena stood a single pedestal topped with a crystalline orb that pulsed with inner light. Kethmor, the massive Grimlock Alpha, descended into the arena with earth-shaking steps. His scarred hide told the story of countless battles, and the way other predators instinctively gave him space spoke to his position in the brutal hierarchy of this world. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the amphitheater. "Behold the human who thinks herself worthy to walk among the apex predators of the galaxy," he rumbled, contempt dripping from every word. "Today she faces the trial of shadows, where she must survive against 3 of our champions while protecting the Heartstone from destruction. Many have tried. All have failed. Their bones decorate our hunting grounds." Sarah stepped into the arena, her emergency kit secured to her belt and her plasma cutter humming with energy. She had spent the night studying the arena's layout and had noticed something the designers might not have intended. The ancient stone pillars were arranged in a specific pattern, one that suggested they served a purpose beyond mere decoration. The first champion emerged from a gate on the far side of the arena. It was a Night Stalker, a creature of living shadow that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Its form writhed and twisted like smoke given malevolent purpose, and where it touched the ground, the very sand seemed to wither and die. Night Stalkers were assassins without equal, capable of phasing through solid matter and striking from dimensions their prey couldn't perceive. The second champion was a quantum beast, a predator evolved on a world where the laws of physics were more suggestions than rules. It appeared to exist in multiple states simultaneously, its form flickering between solid matter and pure energy. When it moved, reality seemed to bend around it, making it impossible to predict where it would be from one moment to the next. The third champion made Sarah's blood run cold. It was a Voidrender, one of the ancient species that had once devoured entire star systems before being hunted to near extinction by the combined fleets of the galaxy. This one was smaller than the legends described, probably a juvenile. But even a young Voidrender possessed the ability to tear holes in space itself and reach through to destroy enemies from impossible angles. The crowd fell silent as the trial began. Sarah immediately sprinted toward the nearest pillar, not to hide but to test her theory about their true purpose. As the Night Stalker flowed toward her like liquid darkness, she pressed her hand against the ancient stone and felt it respond to her touch. Energy flowed through circuits carved into the rock itself, and suddenly she understood. The arena wasn't just a gladiatorial pit. It was a testing ground for something far more sophisticated than simple combat. The pillars were part of a vast mechanism, one that required intelligence and creativity to operate rather than brute force. The Heartstone wasn't meant to be protected through violence, but through understanding. The Night Stalker struck first, its shadowy tendrils passing through the stone pillar as if it weren't there. But Sarah was no longer behind the pillar. She had used the energy flowing through the arena's hidden circuits to activate a defensive field that rendered her temporarily incorporeal. The Night Stalker's attack passed harmlessly through her as she solidified behind it and pressed her plasma cutter against what might have been its core. "Yield," she said calmly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "You cannot win a fight against an opponent who understands your nature better than you understand theirs." The Night Stalker writhed in what might have been confusion or admiration before flowing back to its starting position. It had not been defeated through superior violence, but through superior knowledge. In the stands, Sarah could hear the beginning of what sounded like arguments among the spectators. The quantum beast attacked next, its reality warping abilities creating afterimages that made it seem to be attacking from all directions at once. But Sarah had noticed something during her study of the arena. The quantum beast's abilities were being amplified by the same energy source that powered the pillars. If she could disrupt that connection, she could force it into a single quantum state. She moved with purpose toward the Heartstone, not to protect it, but to use it. The crystalline orb responded to her touch like a musical instrument, its resonance frequency changing as she manipulated its internal structure with precise applications of her plasma cutter. Suddenly, the quantum beast solidified, its multiple probability states collapsing into a single vulnerable form. Instead of pressing her advantage, Sarah approached the now solid creature with her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You're magnificent," she said, wonder clear in her voice. "Your species must have evolved on a world where quantum mechanics operate differently than in normal space. I'd love to learn how your biology interfaces with subatomic reality." The quantum beast, perhaps surprised by this response, settled into a less aggressive posture. Its crystalline eyes seemed to study Sarah with new interest, as if seeing her as something other than prey for the first time. The Voidrender was the final and most dangerous champion. As it began to tear holes in space around the arena, creating portals through which its massive claws could strike from any angle, Sarah realized that brute force would not work here either. The creature was too powerful, too alien, too far beyond normal understanding to defeat through conventional means. Instead, she did something that stunned every observer in the arena. She walked directly toward the Voidrender, ignoring the tears in reality opening around her, and began to speak to it not as an enemy, but as a fellow exile. "You're not from this galaxy, are you?" she said, her voice steady despite the cosmic horror bearing down on her. "Your kind came from somewhere else. Somewhere far beyond the edge of known space. You're not a monster. You're homesick." The Voidrender paused in its attack, its multiple eyes focusing on Sarah with what might have been recognition. When it spoke, its voice came from dimensions human ears weren't designed to process, translated into meaning rather than sound. "How do you know this, small one?" it asked, the portals around the arena beginning to close. "How do you see what others cannot?" "Because I recognize the look," Sarah replied, tears streaming down her face as she felt the cosmic loneliness radiating from the creature. "I've seen it in my own mirror. We're all exiles here, aren't we? All of us taken from where we belong and forced to make a new life among strangers." The arena fell completely silent as the Voidrender slowly approached Sarah. When it was close enough that she could feel the reality-warping energies crackling around its massive form, it did something that would be talked about in legends for millennia to come. It lowered its great head in a gesture of respect. "You understand," it said simply. "You see beyond the fear to the truth beneath. This is wisdom greater than any weapon." From the viewing stands came sounds of astonishment in a dozen different languages. The trial was supposed to end with either Sarah's death or her unlikely victory through combat. Instead, she had transformed it into something unprecedented, a moment of genuine connection between species that had never before shared anything but enmity. But the greatest shock was yet to come. From the highest tier of the arena, a section Sarah had assumed was empty, came the sound of slow, deliberate applause. The crowd parted as a figure descended toward the arena floor, and Sarah found herself face to face with something that shouldn't have existed. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Its skin was the color of deep space, and points of light that might have been stars gleamed beneath its surface. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of eons. "I am Zarthul, first speaker of the Council of Apex Predators," it said, each word carefully chosen. "For 10,000 years, we have tested beings who arrive on this world, seeking one who could see past violence to the truth we guard here. You are the first to understand that strength is not always about the capacity to destroy." Sarah's mind reeled as the implications sank in. This was all a test. The prison planet, the exile, The trials. Zarthul nodded slowly. Kethvar is indeed a prison, but not for punishment. It is a sanctuary for those who were deemed too dangerous for normal society, and a testing ground for those rare beings who might possess the wisdom to unite rather than conquer. The galaxy faces threats from beyond its borders, dangers that can only be met by cooperation between its most powerful inhabitants. The crowd in the arena had fallen to their knees, or whatever equivalent their anatomy allowed. The Night Stalker, Quantum Beast, and Voidrender arranged themselves in a formal honor guard around Sarah, their previous hostility replaced by something she had never expected to see directed at a human: reverence. You have passed the Omega trial, Zarthul continued, not through superior violence, but through superior understanding. The deadliest beings in the galaxy bow before you not because you defeated them, but because you saw them as they truly are. Individuals worthy of respect despite their fearsome nature. As Sarah stood in the center of the ancient arena, surrounded by creatures that could end civilizations, she felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. She had crashed on Kethvar as a lost explorer. She was leaving as something far more significant, the first human to earn the respect of the galaxy's apex predators, and the key to an alliance that might determine the fate of all intelligent life in the cosmos. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter as Sarah Drake, former engineer turned cosmic diplomat, prepared to help write the next chapter in the galaxy's history. And in the viewing stands, the deadliest monsters in known space continued to keep their eyes respectfully lowered before the small human who had shown them that there was more than one way to be strong.